Good evening and welcome to Ziggy's World. I'm Mark Zegveld, and tonight I'm going to be interviewing Euan Blockley. Euan, can you just give us a quick rundown on what you do and what you get up to? And
Yeah. So for 5 years, I was a Glasgow City Councillor, which some people may know me from that. So I represented an area in the south side of Glasgow for the Scottish Conservatives. I've been on kind of various media, TV, radio, that kind of stuff. And I currently work for Liam Kerr in the Scottish Parliament doing kind of research and communications, which, as you can imagine, has been very interesting, Mark, over the last couple of weeks.
Very much so. And we'll get on to that. I'm going to have a 2-second break. And then we'll get into and sort out what's been going on. Welcome back. And Euan, right, we'll get into it now. What's your thoughts of what's happened today?
So, I mean, it's been quite tricky, isn't it? So I've just came back from a canvassing session. Which has been eye-opening, actually, to be honest, in East Renfrewshire, because it's all fine and well. You know, I've been sitting in the house working today, and it's quite difficult to tell how the public are viewing this, other than obviously on Twitter. And, you know, I think the public feeling at the moment is very much mine, which is that, you know, we're glad that this kind of calamitous First Minister is no longer in office. But as one guy said to me today, he's petrified of what's next. Because if you look at what's in the cabinet, you look at the talent, inverted commas, if you could put it that way, they're all dreadful. And it's just you're going to replace one person who's failed upwards with a bunch of other people who have failed upwards, probably with the exception of Kate Forbes. But now it's looking like, you know, they're out to get Kate Forbes, and it's going to be kind of a John Swinney coronation, which I think is just disastrous. But I think what the last couple of weeks has shown us really is that Patrick Harvey has, of course, been running the show. Humza Yousaf's been a very, very incapable First Minister. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen someone that's been so horribly out of their depth in that role. And, you know, I'm so glad that it's over, but it's just, unfortunately, Mark, you know, it's what's next. It's what are we going to be subject
to? Sorry. Do you not think it's the dying embers of a government that's out of touch, and is as we've seen with previous governments in Westminster, and including this one, you can tell when a government has had its day and is on the way out. That is what we're seeing now, isn't it? Because everything that Sturgeon accused Westminster of when Boris was Prime Minister is happening here in Scotland with this government, isn't it? So it has the feel of a government that's had its day and is on the way out. But unfortunately, they've got 2 years left of this, haven't they?
And it's us in Scotland that are going to have to suffer, and have been suffering for a very long time. You know, I mean, the SNP have had Scotland in a kind of vice grip for the last decade or so, first in a majority government, and then obviously the minority government that we've had. And, you know, it's been completely disastrous for Scotland in every single metric that you measure, whether that be on education standards, whether that be A&E wait times, whether that be, you know, the ferry fiasco, where Scotland's kind of struggling economy at the moment, where we're failing to grow the tax base. But a complete burgeoning public sector where you've got huge amounts of civil servants and money for Angus Robertson to go on jaunts to Tartan Week or whatever else. You know, I think they know the game's up. And actually, that's what worries me. It's what they try and push out in the last 2 years once they realise that, well, the game's up, we're going to lose anyway. Why don't we just pursue, you know, some further extremist policies with the Greens? Why don't we, you know, completely ban oil and gas? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? They have it in their power to push some deeply dangerous stuff. We've seen that with the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act, with the hate crime bill, with named persons, with GRR. You know, they have it in their gift to turn around this legislation in a very, very quick amount of time and subject Scotland to it. And I'm genuinely quite terrified of that, because I think what the last decade or slightly longer has shown us is that, you know, every time you think the SNP and now the Scottish Greens can't get any worse, they always seem to manage to shock us in a very negative way.
Do you think, though, that due to what's happened, and Humza can say whatever he like, he went for principle, he went for this, and he was pushed out by his own party. That was quite evidently, it was his own party that told him, you've got to go now. So that's that. And I think that alone is why that's happened. And it's due to him being weak, especially with the Greens. Now, do you think the next person in line, and by all accounts, it's going to be Swinney, and I think the same as you. Now, but do you think those that pushed Humza out will allow Swinney to carry on where Humza left out? And do you think we'll be back here in another 6 months?
Yeah. I mean, I think after the inevitable drubbing at the general election that the SNP have coming, I think John Swinney will probably leave. I think he might say that they'll stay up to the general election. Whether he'll be allowed to kind of carry on with these kind of men in grey kilts, as Salmond kind of put it earlier on, I don't know, because I don't know the internal workings of the SNP too well, and I don't really know enough of the kind of personalities behind the scenes to be able to comment extensively on that, other than the fact that I think John Swinney is a bit more pally with the Greens. I mean, Hum's obviously burnt all those bridges. Swinney seems to have been quite important in terms of the Butte House Agreement and its creation. Seems to be quite pally with Ross Greer. I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how anyone could be mates with that guy, but apparently he seems to be quite close with him. So, I think he'll be able to kind of patch that together. There'll probably be some form of confidence and supply. I don't think the Greens will go back into government. I don't think they will. No. But I think there'll be some form of confidence and supply like they've had before. So I don't think the government's going to collapse. The Greens have already kind of rode back now that Humza has said that he's no longer going to he's going to resign. As a result of that, the Greens have said, well, look, we're not going to support any motions of no confidence. We're not going to support any of that. So they've already kind of got back in their box, really, which is kind of what you would expect of them, really. But I don't know. I mean,
do you think Swinney is being picked because he does get on with the Greens, like you've said, but he also gets on with quite a lot in Labour as well, doesn't he? And do you think that could be a relationship where they might want to try and use to try and get some policies through rather than be a lame duck government for 2 years? Do you think they might use his influence, his connections, because he does have a few connections within Labour and around Parliament? Do you think that may be why they're picking him?
Well, I mean, he had the reputation. I mean, I think this has been torn to shreds in the last few years. He's been called Honest John. That was his nickname. Yeah. I think anyone that knows his politics. Yes, I think that's been tested in the last couple of years, to put it mildly. But I mean, look, Labour's policy positions on a number of things are very, very similar to the SNP. Now, look, obviously, register of interest, I would say that's a Conservative. But if you look at GRR, for example, if you look at the hate crime bill, if you look at these sorts of things, you'll see that Labour have backed these things. There was a really good piece, I think it was in the Telegraph today, that I was reading, where it was essentially all these major votes on policy, whether it was on tax rises, these things that the vast majority of unionists are not happy with. Labour backed it. And actually, what you would have, say, if there was a Labour government in Scotland, is you wouldn't have independence, which would be a bonus. But all of the negative policies like GRR and like the hate crime bill, they would still pursue. They're not really that much different. So Swinney probably could get some concessions and perhaps from them. I think Labour would be probably too smart, though, to agree to any of that, if they're smart, because ultimately they want this government out. And they're not going to want to help the SNP government in any way. Anas Sarwar, for all his flaws, and there are many, he is a canny operator. He's been in the game a long time, and I think he would realise that helping this government out at this point is very much, I don't think voters would appreciate it. I think it's probably the nicest way of putting it. So I think he will sit there and bide his time. I don't think anyone's going to come to John Swinney's rescue if he becomes First Minister, except for the Greens. And I think that's why he'll be put in place, because he's the only person there that wasn't in the cabinet. I mean, you've got to remember as well, it wasn't just Humza Yousaf that agreed to end the Butte House Agreement. It was the entire Scottish cabinet. They all agreed on it. So the Greens are holding them responsible for that as well. Now, John Swinney, of course, is not in cabinet, so he's therefore seen as the kind of safe pair of hands that has enough distance, as if John Swinney wasn't involved in any of this and is, oh no, this is the first I'm hearing of it. I'm sure, John, yeah, you and Sturgeon, you're not involved in any way. Well, obviously, Sturgeon's got her own worries at the moment, but I think it's safe to say that John Swinney has been more than a background figure, but he will be able to go in and try and kind of smooth over any difficulties with the Greens. But that won't last. It will come to the general election and the Scottish people will make their verdict known.
Do you think with Humza now going, that ends any chance of an early Holyrood election? Because there was a possibility if he'd stayed and he lost the no vote of confidence, and Labour brought in the vote of confidence in the government, and that was going to be close. There was, and because there'd be a lame government, because nobody was going to work with Humza. Labour had already said, Conservatives were never going to work with him, and Labour said that they would go on election mode and oppose any new policies from Humza. And that would have really meant 2 years of just sitting back and nothing getting done. So there was a big possibility of an early election. And even Humza himself said that was a possibility in an interview with Sky. Now, do you think now that's basically not going to happen now that he's gone, because the Greens have said they won't vote for one? So it doesn't look likely, does it?
I mean, I don't think the SNP are relishing the prospect of facing the country at the moment, because the country I mean, from the canvassing I've been doing over the last few months, people aren't very happy.
Is that what you're hearing on the doorsteps, though? Because I know we hear on social media and we hear on by politicians and that, but sometimes you can get into a bit of a bubble. Even we know they're in a bubble, but we can do the same and think, well, is it as bad as that? What are you hearing at the doorsteps then?
So that's why canvassing is always so important, because especially when you work in Holyrood and you're surrounded by people that agree with you, and it's quite good to get out there and speak to people and have those conversations. What we're hearing on the doorsteps in the various constituencies that I've been in is, and they're obviously target Conservative seats, so they're areas that we do have a base of support, but it's that people are absolutely sick of the SNP. I mean, even SNP voters that we're speaking to are saying, I'm not voting for them again. Now, they're not coming over and voting for us. Some of them might vote Labour. Some of them are staying at home. And I think that will be a big part of the story, much like in 2017, where, the Scottish Conservatives made significant gains.
Isn't it?
Yeah, because I think that Unionists are very enthused to get out there and give them a kicking. But nationalists are thinking, I'm not going to vote for anyone else, but am I really going to go out there and vote for this lot? No, I think they deserve a kicking. And, the SNP voters that we've spoken to just sound lost. I mean, they do. A lot of these people have put their trust and faith in the SNP for a variety of reasons, whatever they may be. I don't agree with them, but I think they're feeling a bit lost. As I would imagine, many of these people, one guy said to me when I was speaking to him, this was a couple of months ago, he said that the way he felt betrayed Scottish Labour when Labour supported the Union and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of his nationalist view of it. He said he now felt the same with the SNP. He felt that same anger that he felt with Scottish Labour with the SNP. Now, that was really strong, because I remember how angry a lot of people were at Scottish Labour at that point. And I thought, my goodness, if this is happening with nationalists now, they're in deep, deep trouble. Now, that was months ago.
Taken for granted. And I think, like say, they feel now that the SNP, over the last at least 10 years, have taken them for granted. And what I've heard quite a few times, and from nationalists and from ex-SNP members, is that if they're not going to get independence, which they're not going to get with the SNP, then they turn their attention to the state of Scotland. And they were putting up with the state of the way Scotland is in because of this promise of independence.
Yeah.
And they would sort it without, and a lot of times, so many people said, well, the SNP will be voted out once we get independence. and then we'll sort the country out. Now they know they're not going to get independence. They're looking and thinking, well, I'm having to put up with the potholes, and I'm having to put up with this and the GRR and all this nonsense, and there's no chance of an independence, so why am I voting for them?
Yeah.
That's what I've heard quite a lot. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's that apathy of as well, where they're just feeling like, what's the point? You know, I mean, as you rightly said, you know, they're seeing that independence isn't on the horizon. Even the most ardent independent supporters are accepting that it's not going to happen soon. And, you know, I think that is a major win for us as unionists, as the fact that they've accepted that it's not going to happen. It's taken them about 10 years. And as a result, Scottish public services are in ruins because they've spent all this time thinking there's going to be a second one and pushing for it rather than concentrating on the issues that matter. But we've got there. But the problem is, until we get the SNP out of government, you're going to still have this huge amount of time that's wasted. And I think you're right. There is a section of middle Scotland that maybe gave the SNP the benefit of the doubt, that quite like Nicola Sturgeon actually, that are looking at public services now, are looking at, as you said, the potholes. They're looking at the state of the schools. They're looking at the state of our hospitals, and they're thinking, what have these guys actually done? Like, what have they done? Why are we constantly rewarding failure? And look who they're putting up. They're putting up Humza Yousaf. You know, they're putting up people that aren't even good communicators. And, you know, I want to say this as well, actually, because I think it's quite important that many people say to us as the Scottish Conservatives, and I hear this criticism about, you know, what are you guys doing in terms of being a strong opposition? And what I hope we've proven over the last week is exactly what a strong opposition is and what it does.
Yeah.
And, you know, for all the criticism that Douglas Ross gets, and he gets a lot of criticism, a lot of it unwarranted in my view, and I know the man personally, and I think he's done a fantastic job. But what you've seen in the last week is exactly not only the canny operator, but the leader that he is, and he's taken down 2 First Ministers now. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon over GRR with the help of Alistair Jack, and now obviously we're seeing this with Humza Yousaf, and that to me that's where we could be as a country, and it's what I think angers me quite a lot, Mark, is where we are right now. You know, you look at the state. I mean, I'm looking outside my window right now, and there's a massive pothole in the road that I've literally I've reported 3 times, and as a former councillor, it's annoying because you know these people can do it and they can fix it. But it's like, this is Susan Aitken's ward, the head of the council. This is her ward, yeah. Just a spruce up, that's all it needs. But it's Scotland is in such a depressing state at the moment, and it ultimately is down to the SNP. And I think
number of people that say, I've walked down Glasgow High Street and it is an absolute, you know,
Union Street. I mean, have you been on Union Street? It is honestly,
I haven't been to Glasgow for a while.
Right. Okay.
I'm in Dumfries, so I'm in Dumfries.
Right.
So I'm at the borders. So, but I haven't. But the number of people that I've spoken to that live in Glasgow and are saying it is just
horrendous.
What's going on?
It's horrendous. And you know, the thing is, I never thought we would get worse than the Labour Council that we had, because we had a Labour Council for like 30 years, and it was like a hegemony. You know, it was always going to be a Labour Council, you felt. And then we got an SNP council, and that was the year that I was elected. And I thought, well, do you know what? I mean, I really despise the Nats, but I'm hoping that at least it'll be new people, maybe fresh ideas, fresh thinking. And they've managed to be worse. I mean, I mean, for all Labour's faults, I mean, they didn't allow Sucky Hall Street to be a building site for 5 years and then not compensate any of the businesses, forcing them all to be boarded up. And if you go on Union Street, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how unsafe I feel as a man, let alone a woman being on a street like that. I mean, my God, it is horrifying. Union Street, when you come out of Central Station, it is just, I mean, you're watching people, like, fights just break out constantly. People chasing other people down the street with a knife. That happened, was that a couple of weeks ago? I was in town. And this was in broad daylight. And I'm sitting there going, imagine I'm a tourist. And I'm going, yeah, fancy Glasgow. You come up from London or whatever. I've heard Glasgow's got a great culture scene, as it does. You know, fantastic music scene, great gigs, great venues, good pubs. Let's go and visit Glasgow for the day. And you come out of Central Station and you see that. I'd be doing a U-turn and getting back on the train. Like, and that is what the SNP have done. That's what Susan Aitken's done. That's what they've allowed Glasgow to turn into. And as I said, it was because when I was a councillor, they were spending more time talking about Gaza, spending more time talking about foreign policy, independence, than they were about roads and pavements. And unfortunately, in Holyrood, it's exactly the same. They're spending all this time talking about stuff that doesn't concern them and that they shouldn't really be talking about, and they should be talking about devolved issues. But it goes back to that central point where, the SNP are going to keep doing this. John Swinney is going to be exactly the same. Mark, he's not going to be any different, is he?
No.
He's going to be the same.
No. I think he's another shocking politician. I think I know he's probably the best of a really, really bad bunch.
But how low has the bar got to?
Oh, the bar's so far low. It's unbelievable. It's about below the ground. It's that low. But but he probably is, because of his experience and the longevity, and that's probably all he's got going for him, is that he's been in politics a long time and he's held some big position. The rest of them, they've done nothing, have they? No. I don't think there's one of them that they're talking about. They're probably only one, and I still think she's a shocking politician, is Kate Forbes, who would do the best job of the lot. But I still think she's not great. But for some reason, the SNP don't want her.
No, and the progressive wing, well, progressive inverted commas. I mean, if you believe that the views that they espouse are progressive in any way, but yes, they don't like Kate Forbes, mainly because I have to say that the thing she said at the leadership hustings last year. I remember when she had a right go at Humza. That was fantastic for us, anyway. I don't know.
And that clip should be played time and time again, because what she said has actually come true. He's a shocking health minister. He was a shocking transport minister. Shocking. Whatever the other position he had in
justice. It was justice
minister. And she said, "Why? So what makes you think that you're going to be a good first minister?" And she was, and we all knew she was correct anyway. But it's been proved that she was correct, because he's been an absolute shocking first minister. Did you watch his speech today?
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Yeah.
The part that stands out to me was this idea that they are in touching distance.
Oh, yeah.
We're the last couple of miles of a marathon, and we just need to get to the end. And you know something, and I know, and people might criticize me for saying this, but I have posted it. It reminds me of Germany 1945, when Hitler's in his bunker and he's been surrounded by the Brits, the Americans, the Russians, and his aides in the bunker with him are all saying, "Don't worry, Hitler. We are so close to winning the war. We're going to win the war. We're going to fight back, and we will win this war." And they're all coming in, and I'm thinking, it's exactly the same, isn't it? And since he did that speech, I've seen just about every single top SNP MPs and all the SPADs coming out, all saying the same. He's brought us so close to independence. Same as what they said with Sturgeon.
It's exactly the same.
But the content of her speech is different.
The content of her speech was very similar in terms of that within touching distance. It was a similar type of language. And it's the carrot and the stick. It's only a bit further. And to be fair, I think enough people have woken up.
Yeah.
Finally, it's like the
front page. They're laughing at them now, aren't they?
Well, it's the front pages of the National. I mean, if what was it? Save the date. October 2023, save the date. Yeah. And I think someone had made a compilation. I actually think it might have been Wings or someone else had made a compilation of all these front pages of the National where they had said that an indirect and once you'd seen it, and there was like 80 of them, I think enough people were looking at that going, yeah, I mean, I think these lads are having his own, I don't think they're quite sincere. I think they're relatively comfortable with their salaries and are just happy to essentially give some sprinkles to the independence people and say it's just beyond reach. Because ultimately Sturgeon done them in because she actually got it tested in a court and got laughed out. So it's
I actually think that one thing she did, and Alex Salmond mentioned it in an interview, and which I watched afterwards after it'd gone to court, and he said that is such bad politics.
Yeah.
Is to go to a court where you probably 90% know you are going to lose, but why are you it's being confirmed by the Supreme Court in law that an independence referendum is up to the government of the UK government.
Yeah.
And it was such decisive, there was no no kind of leeway for it to be any different.
Yep.
So what his judgment was, and I actually think that day was the end of the nationalism in Scotland. It was only a matter of time from then onwards where we were going to get to where we are today. Going forward, now I know you don't like me doing this, so I am gonna have to put you on the spot. Just a few. When do you think the leadership debate or whatever it's going to be in the SNP? How long do you think it's gonna be till that happens? Because I'm hearing people are talking, he's pulled a fast one. It's going to be months and months. When do you think it'll be?
So I think it's going to be a Swinney coronation, is what I think. I don't think there's going to be a contest
like Sturgeon.
No, I don't think so. I think it will be. They will allow him to take the bullet for the next general election, and then have a year to a year and a half period of time where they can bed in a new leader leading up to the next Scottish Parliament election.
So I don't think he'll be put in pretty quickly.
It could be as soon as next week. I think. I don't think they'll want Humza, essentially hanging about like a bad smell. I think they'll want him out as quickly as possible. Get John Swinney in their view, stabilise things with the Greens, get the government majority back together. Try and build, I would imagine he'll attempt to build bridges with us and then Labour. It certainly won't work with us. I don't know about Labour, we need to wait and see. But, he'll try and do that kind of fig leaf stuff that every First Minister, bar Humza Yousaf, has done, which is say, I want to work cooperatively across parties. Even Sturgeon said that at one point. Funnily enough, the only First Minister that I know that's actually done that is Alex Salmond. He was the only one that actually worked across. No, he had to because he had a minority.
Yeah.
But to be fair, he worked with us on some budgets. He worked with Labour. I mean, this was almost nearly 2 decades ago. It was ages ago. But I think that was probably the last time. So Swinney, it'll be interesting to see what he does. But I think he'll get back into bed with the Greens, and we'll just be back to square one, unfortunately, Mark. And Scotland, as a result, will be back in square one, and we won't be able to get rid of them until 2026. And by then, I think Scotland will be so utterly sick of them. I mean, if it's bad now, if Scots are sick of them now, another 2 years of inevitable failures will be
what's coming down the line as well, because there's a lot more to come out, isn't there?
The ongoing police investigation.
There's a lot more to come out, especially with the investigation, and I still think we don't even know half of it, do we? We don't know half of what's been going on, and the deals they've been doing, the backhanders they've been giving, the
there was a colleague that said to me earlier, like, and Peter Murrow, remember he was at it. I was like, that's right, that was this month. Like, so much has happened in the space of about a week that I completely forgot that Peter Murrow had been arrested and charged. That was like at the back of my mind. And I thought that was such a major political event that's been completely, quite rightly, overshadowed by what's happened here. But that, I mean, what's going to come out of that is going to be huge.
Maybe what they're doing, and it's a master plan.
All right, you think it's all part of it to get them out of the news.
Part of a big master plan is that they're going to throw everything at us all at once, so we get overload, and then we all just like, it just becomes another scandal. Yeah, well, then that's fine.
But they couldn't, Mark. The one thing you're missing out here is they couldn't get ferries to float. I think you're giving them far too much credit.
Yeah. That's very true. Yeah, it's just gotta. I was really hoping that I wanted Humza gone because he has been an absolute disaster for Scotland.
Yeah.
But I kind of was hoping that he might limp on to the general election, because that would guarantee an absolute. I know they're going to get hammered anyway. It's just, it's without doubt they're going to get a good kicking at the general election.
Yeah.
But I was hoping he would probably limp on a little bit, and then we'd get a Holyrood election maybe afterwards, after a general election, and that would be it for the SNP, because they're bankrupt, aren't they?
Yes.
So they couldn't afford.
No.
Because it would be a general election, a Holyrood election, and then another Holyrood election in 2 years' time, because that has to carry on, doesn't it? It's in the Scotland Act, so they'd have 3 elections.
But Mark, what you're forgetting is, if you read Twitter, they've got hundreds of thousands of new members signed up. From Murrell Towers, they're all joining up. They've got all these millions.
Yeah. I got told they were. I said they were bankrupt, and someone said, no, they've got 500,000 in the bank. And I was like, well, 2 months ago they only had 46 grand. And that was before they had the Rutherglen by-election to pay for. And
I think it will be very interesting. I think another reason why they don't want to hold a leadership election is because they'd have to give out their membership figures, and I would be very interested to see them. I think it was Tom Gordon that said that. It was like, very interested to see. And I think having a coronation, they don't get any of that. Any of that internal scrutiny that the SNP are obviously very keen on. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's under something like 50k now. If it's, because I think it was about 70. Well, they said it was 7. I mean, who knows? Maybe in the police investigation we'll find out. Who knows?
Yes, because that's another thing that's gonna come over is what happens with. I know we can't really discuss too much about it, but what's going to happen with the likes of Nicola Sturgeon? Because, and that's another thing that's interested me over this last 72 hours or so that's gone on, is Sturgeon. Now, when Humza became First Minister, she was very, very proactive in making sure that the continuity candidate got the job and that Humza got it. Now, in the last 72 hours or so, you've not heard a peep from Sturgeon. She's been all over the place, hasn't she? She's been in England for the last partying for the last couple of days, seen all the pictures and that. So has her grip on the party now gone? Is that gone? Has she still got influence, or is she now totally like Alex Salmond? What happened with Alex Salmond? Have they cut her adrift and kind of making sure she's not really involved now?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't think so. I think she is still involved. Whether she's making decisions, I mean, I think the way to tell is, when Humza Yousaf was asked about the 2 former First Ministers, I think it was on The Rest is Politics, and he was asked about it, and he was asked about Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon, because they were the 2 First Ministers that he'd worked for. And he was scathing about Alex Salmond, as you would expect, which showed the tensions there. And then Nicola Sturgeon, he was nothing but praise. And I think for the majority of the SNP top brass, if you ask them, Ian Blackford, for example, you ask these people that are party grandees in the SNP. I mean, I don't know what constitutes a grandee in the SNP. Maybe James Dorn and John Mason, maybe they're grandees now. But it's just, they still are incredibly defensive of her. And I think that shows that she still has that presence within the SNP. They still respect her. They still hold her in high regard. They're still willing to come out and bat for her, even if it's unpopular with the public. So that shows that she does still have influence. Whether that will continue or not, I think will be up to the police investigation and the outcome of that.
Yeah.
And then they will make a judgment based on however the outcome turns out to be.
Yeah. Do you think? And I'll ask you one more question before we finish, and it's a big question,
right?
And it's you've got to think long and hard about this one.
Right? Okay.
Do you think Humza will get a bunch of flowers of the SNP when they do their conference? Because the conference is coming up shortly, isn't it?
Oh, we're tuning in for that. Yeah.
Do you think at the conference, Humza will be asked to come on stage, and maybe Swinney will come out with a big bunch of flowers for Humza? Do you think?
I think that would be fantastic, Mark. I think for the meme value alone, and on Twitter for all of us, I mean, we would highly welcome that. I mean, considering how they've been running their communications the last week, anything is possible. So you should go along to the conference and hand him the flowers for all he's done for unionism.
Well, that's an idea. I may well do that, but I
don't know if you'd get in. I don't know if they'd let you in, Mark. I'll be honest.
No, but I'd have to join the SNP, and I'm not sure I could give them my money, because no, I don't think that's on the cards. But yeah, it's been an interesting 3 or 4 days, and it's been very interesting speaking to you as usual. Thank you for giving up your time, because I know you've been really busy and you've had a real busy day. So I do appreciate you coming on and telling us your thoughts and talking through all this madness that's gone on. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for everyone for hope you enjoyed the show. Please, your thumbs up as always, because that does help with the channel. Share and subscribe so I can get as big an audience as possible. So if you can do that, it would be much appreciated. And leave your comments, because I like reading through all your comments of what you thought about tonight, what you thought about what's happened over the last 72 hours, and what you think is going to happen in the next 72 hours. A day in Scottish politics is, anything can happen and anything can change overnight. This could be yesterday's news tomorrow, because something bigger might come along.
Probably.
You just never know. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. So thank you very much. Good night.